Hi guys, welcome back to a new session of fun with sexual reproduction in human. Alright, so today's topic is periods or the menstrual cycle, which is my favorite segment apparently in the entire chapter. So let's get started. What's the basic idea that we get when we listen to the term period or menstruation? I think almost all of us, all my audiences have this basic idea that whatever we understand by period is shedding of blood from female vagina. That's all we understand by period or menstruation, right? But let me ask you, why does it happen? Why does this thing take place? So basically, periods or menstruation is one of the major sign of puberty. Now, as I said, puberty is basically when your body is preparing to be an adult. So certain features develop in the female body, certain features develop in the male body, which are helping them to grow as an adult, right? So one of the very important role or very important ability of the female body is to reproduce, to give birth to a child, right? To be pregnant, to conceive a baby in her body. So that's one of the abilities that the female body has. So what happens is during the puberty, the female body, it prepares to gain that ability to give birth to a child or to conceive a child in her body and be pregnant. And puberty or menstrual cycle is basically something about that. So now the question is, how is it even related, right? So the basic idea is, since our body is preparing, whenever our body is pregnant, so it's preparing for pregnancy. So if it gets pregnant, then it gets pregnant. But if pregnancy doesn't occur in that month, then menstruation or period takes place. Now let's see how it happens, right? So we know this diagram, do we? Yes, it's the female reproductive system. Alright, so we know this structure. Ovary. It contains the eggs or the ovas. So this ovary over here, since I have ticked here, let me show it here. This ovary over here has many this-like structures, circle-like structure called follicles. So these follicles are basically not something different. Follicles over here basically contain the egg cell or the ovum. One follicle contains one egg cell, and it's also surrounded by some other cells that are called the follicle cells. So each of the ovaries contain some fixed amount of follicles in itself, right? Now what happens is, when a girl steps to puberty, each month one follicle from alternatively any one of the ovary, it develops, it matures into a structure that is called Graafian follicle. So the mature version of follicle is basically called Graafian follicle, right? So what happens is, then about Graafian follicle then bursts or gets released into the oviduct, and this releasing of the egg cell or the Graafian follicle into the oviduct is basically called, this process is called ovulation. And this takes place approximately 2 weeks or 14 days before the first day of period or menstruation. Now let's see. Then egg passes and comes into here, right? So now, if any, by this time another process takes place. So you see, this is basically the uterus and this is the uterine lining. Now what happens is, this is the original uterine lining. Now, in preparation of being pregnant during the puberty, every month the uterine lining in a female body thickens. So you see, this is the thickened version. This much is thickened. Why does it thicken? So that if any sperm cell is present and the egg cell and the sperm cell fuse and fertilization occur, so that the fertilized cell can implant into the uterine lining and then form into an embryo, and then the woman gets pregnant in that month, right? What a perfect preparation, right? Egg releasing, then lining developed, everything prepared for pregnancy. Now, If in that month no sperm cells fuse with that egg cell, then how can the girl get pregnant? Then what happens is, this uterine lining, it gets very angry. It says to the body, what? You're not pregnant. What do you mean? My effort, it has no value. Like, I made the lining, I made so preparation to be pregnant, and it doesn't have any value. And now I'm not needed anymore because next month another egg will be released and another lining will be developed. So in this month I'm not needed anymore. I'm unnecessary. Okay, fine. Since I'm unnecessary, then let me leave your body. Typical Bengali psychology, I tell you. Too much sentimental. So what the uterus lining does is that this lining over here gets sentimental and says, I will leave your body because you think I'm not important and I'm unnecessary. So then it leaves the body along with the egg cell that was released from the ovary to the oviduct, right? Along with the egg cell, and now since it's leaving, it says, okay, since I'm leaving, let me take something from you as well. So along with the uterine lining, the egg cell and some blood from the body, it releases out of the vagina. And that is the first day of menstruation or period. So this is the very basic idea of the menstruation. Now about menstrual cycle, it's also very simple. So the very first day of period or the shedding of blood from vagina is basically considered as the first day of period or the first day of menstrual cycle. Now it usually lasts till, it's considered to 5 days, but it can last till 7 days, or especially during teenage, in puberty, sometimes it can happen more than that due to some hormonal imbalance in girls. Like for me, it's none of the times it's less than 2 weeks. Okay, so yeah, so it can occur sometimes in when the girls are in puberty. It takes some time for the hormones to balance and have a regular period with some regular time, right? But anyways, so what the cycle basically is controlled is, so from day 1 the period starts and it's considered till day 5. So from day 6 to day 10, the uterus lining, since the uterus lining broke down, now the day 6 to day 10 the uterus lining recovers, right? Then from day 11 to day 17, the egg, basically like the follicle, it matures to graphene follicle and gets released. That basically ovulation takes place. And from day 18 to day 28, again the lining of the uterus develops and prepares to be pregnant. So that if a sperm is present, can fuse with the egg cell, it can implant and form an embryo, and that month the woman is pregnant. If it happens, then the following month woman is pregnant. If it doesn't happen, then once again the uterine lining along with some blood and the egg cell, it breaks down through vagina, and again the new cycle starts from the first day of period. And that's how it continues in a female body starting from puberty. Alright, so that's basically it. Now, okay, we are done. Very simple, you see. But there comes a new dramatic character. That is our brain. Brain says, hey, this can't be accepted. A so big process, a so important process is taking place in the body, and I'm not being able to participate. How is that possible? Now look, you don't get everything you want in life, okay? Brain has to understand that. I mean, come on. Brain is here, processes taking place in the uterus and ovary. Now, how on earth will brain continue from here to here, or here to here, or basically here to here, whatever. Alright, so how will brain continue? Like, participate. Now, what brain thinks is, no, I have to do something so that years later, when a teen girl called Joyita Moitri present on this topic, she will say to her audience, hey, do you know, this process is controlled by the brain. Yes, the word control. So brain decides, since I'm not being able to directly participate, let me control the system, let me rule, let me be the ruler, I'll give orders and they will simply follow. So brain does that with the help of a chemical substance called hormones. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that term. So hormone itself is a pretty big part of biology, but let me just give you a simple definition of hormone. Hormones are chemical substances that are released by a certain part of the body and that travels through the blood and goes to the target organ for which it was released and exerts its effect on that target organ. That's basically what hormones are, right? Now, in the menstrual cycle, entire menstrual cycle, there are a total act of 4 hormones. Among the 4 hormones, 2 of the hormones are released directly by the brain. The 2 hormones are FSH and LH. I will tell the full form of each of them when I'm explaining it in detail. And the other 2 hormones are not directly released by the brain. Please now note the word directly. They are not directly released by the brain, which means there is a possibility that the brain is indirectly making them to release, because brain wants to participate in everything, right? Such an attention seeker. Anyways, alright, so now since we have the idea about the entire process, we just have to now see how the brain is causing all the processes to take place, right? Because we know the basic idea. So what happens at the very first thing is this hormone FSH. So brain has a part called pituitary gland. It's a part of the brain, pituitary gland. Okay, so brain has a structure called the pituitary gland. Now what the pituitary gland does is that pituitary gland basically releases this hormone FSH. The full form of FSH is, please listen carefully, follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle. I think we heard this term before, follicle. So, yes, follicles are present in the ovary. So, follicle stimulating, what can it be? Stimulate follicles too? Well, yes, the very first step, follicles are maturing into Graafian follicle. That's what FSH does. FSH now converts this follicle to mature into Graafian follicle. Now, one hormone is done. One hormone from the brain is done. Out of 4, one hormone is done. Left is 3. Now, remember the other 2 hormones that are not directly released by the brain? One of those hormones is estrogen. So what it does is that, now the second process is basically, the function of estrogen is to build up the lining of the uterus, right? This lining, so that the fertilized egg cell can implant. But now the brain says, okay, but I have so less participation, I want more credit. So what it does is that it starts its indirect game. So what this FSH does is that FSH not only stimulates the follicle to convert into mature into Graafian follicle, but it also stimulates the ovary to produce estrogen. So basically estrogen is produced by the ovary, but the FSH from pituitary gland or brain is stimulating the ovary to produce estrogen. Now the estrogen over here basically builds up the lining. So now let's see. We have the follicle matured into Graafian follicle, and we have the lining of the uterus already built up. Super cool. So now it's all like basic thing is done, right? Now then, yeah, egg will be released and then next process. So yeah, the function of hormones is done. So what the estrogen does is that it stimulates the pituitary gland. Estrogen in turn, this in turn stimulates the pituitary gland over here to stop producing any more FSH. Because what was the function of FSH? Function of FSH was to mature one follicle into Graafian follicle. So that's why now the follicle matured into one follicle, matured into Graafian follicle. So it should stop producing any more FSH because so that any more follicle is not matured into Graafian follicle in that month, right? And also estrogen, if it's already uterus lining is filled, so no more estrogen is needed. So if the production of FSH is stopped. Haha, brain, you have no more credit. But brain now says, okay, fine, I participated in the very first segment of your process, but what about the second segment? You will take the credit all on your own. I can't let that happen. So now, when the production of FSH is stopped, now pituitary gland of the brain instead now releases LH. LH is luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone. What does it do? So what's the next step? The mature Graafian follicle will be released into the oviduct. So what happens is simple. LH stimulates ovary to release the Graafian follicle into oviduct. Basically, LH causes ovulation to take place, releasing of the egg cell or the Graafian follicle. Okay, now brain is happy. Okay, no more brain's fault. We can't blame the brain always. Brain is happy that, cool, I participated in the first segment, I participated in the second segment, egg release. Okay, I'm happy. But this LH over here now has a problem. LH says to the pituitary gland in the brain that, well, before me you release FSH. FSH has had two functions. First one, maturing follicle into Graafian follicle. Second one, stimulating the ovary to release estrogen. And estrogen in turn had different functions. Now, you gave me only one. No. Only causing ovulation, only one. I'm not happy. I want more credit. So now, what the LH does is that this egg that was released into the oviduct, this egg over here, the LH now develops this Graafian follicle over here, released Graafian follicle that is containing the egg cell, this Graafian follicle over here into another, it's basically a structural difference but thing is same, into corpus luteum. Let me write it the spelling. Corpus luteum. Alright, so now the LH over here, it develops the Graafian follicle containing the egg cell into corpus luteum. Now, this corpus luteum, so function of LH done. So now the corpus luteum now releases another hormone. That is actually the last hormone of the menstrual cycle, because you see FSH released, LH released, this one released. Out of total of 4 hormones, 3 hormones released. So this is the very last hormone of the menstrual cycle, which is basically called progesterone. Progesterone. So the progesterone over here, what does it do? So first of all, progesterone, it basically maintains the lining of the uterus. So this lining was developed by the estrogen but maintained by progesterone, so that implantation of the fertilized egg can take place whenever fertilization occurs, right? It maintains the lining. Progesterone also stops the pituitary gland to produce any more LH or FSH, because already ovulation takes place, so that no more mature a follicle takes place and no more ovulation takes place in that month. So that's why production of FSH and LH is stopped. Now progesterone maintains the lining of the uterus so that implantation of the fertilized egg can take place. Basically, so that the fertilized egg can settle into the uterus lining. Now what? Now, if in that month the fertilized egg settles, the woman gets pregnant, and menstruation doesn't occur in that month if the woman gets pregnant, and if woman doesn't get pregnant, so menstruation will occur. So that month when menstruation is occurring, basically the uterus lining along with blood and along with the egg cell, it's breaking down. That time the level of progesterone, it decreases. Ask why? That's because what was the job of progesterone? The job of progesterone was to maintain the uterus lining. Now that the uterus lining is breaking down, which means progesterone will definitely decrease. You can consider it in other ways also, because the progesterone level is decreasing, that's why the uterus lining is breaking down. So it works both ways actually, because brain wants to control everything, right? Alright, so that's basically it of the entire menstrual cycle. Let us revise a little bit, as in what we have discussed so far. So we have seen that every month one follicle matures into Graafian follicle, which is done by FSH. FSH from pituitary gland. FSH also stimulates the ovary to produce estrogen, which builds up the uterus lining. Then estrogen stops the production of FSH. Then LH is released. LH stimulates ovulation, which is the release of the Graafian follicle, and it converts or develops the Graafian follicle into corpus luteum. There are maybe structural differences, but we don't have to go into that depth in this level. Alright, and then the corpus luteum releases the very last hormone, progesterone, which maintains the lining of the uterus, and what does it do? It stops the production of FSH and LH. And then in that month, if the woman gets pregnant, then basically if a sperm fuses with the egg, then the woman gets pregnant, and the fertilized cell settles into the uterus lining. And if the woman doesn't get pregnant, then this uterus lining is not needed anymore. This extra uterus lining that was built is not needed anymore. So it's released from the vaginal canal with some blood, and that is called the first day of period or menstruation. See, it's so easy. It's not that so much complicated, right? Alright, so now we are done with the biology part of this video. But hey, today I want to talk about something else too, because I said it's my favorite and the most interesting part from this chapter. So I think menstruation or period, especially in girls of this region, I don't know if it's worldwide or not, but at least I can say in my surroundings, it's a very big taboo, you can say, honestly speaking. So I don't really want to blame on it anyone that you see people, girls around us, they have so much taboo, or people around us in the society have so much taboo. No, I don't want to play a blame game with taboos, okay? Let me just share an event, okay? So few months back, in the beginning of 2020, I think, back at that time I was in grade 8, just before the lockdown started. So I remember in one such month, I had very, sometimes due to hormonal imbalance, sometimes girls, they can have heavy period, heavy bleeding. That's totally okay. All right. So what happened to me was, due to some carelessness maybe, I was in school and my sanitary napkin or the pad, it basically leaked. And there was a blood stain at the back of my dress. Okay? Now, one of my friend saw my face. My face was suddenly, in a bit of second, it was completely white, as if I had just seen a ghost. Literally. Okay? Literally. And okay, so yeah, I washed up, I cleaned up. That was fine, that day went well. The next day, same thing repeated. Okay. So I was first of all, I was very irritated, which is very okay. Come on, if if the water I'm drinking falls into a dress, we will get irritated. If the curry we are eating, if it falls into our dress and a stain of curry takes place, we will get irritated. Why did it happen? But you know, it's not just irritation at that moment. At least for me, it wasn't just irritation. It was that embarrassment and just sudden fear of getting embarrassed in public. What if someone sees? What if this happens? What if that happens, right? This sudden embarrassment, this sudden fear of getting embarrassment was poked in my brain, and suddenly I just said to myself, I hate being a girl. Why am I a girl? I hate being a girl. I wish I was a boy. Then I wouldn't have to go through this stupid experience. And then, there are sometimes some moments in our life when we say something to ourselves, say something to others, and then we repent that, okay, we shouldn't have said that to this person. I felt that with myself. The very moment I said it, the next very moment, I felt that, no, I shouldn't have said that to myself. I shouldn't have treated myself that way. I just shouldn't have, right? I was repenting, and then in my mind I thought, am I the same person? Am I the same girl who always wanted to break the taboos around her? Maybe my YouTube audiences won't understand it fully, but people who know me personally, who are my friends from the past 3 to 4 years, they know that how much I always want to go through the limitations. I want to break the limitations. I want to break the taboo and live fully, right? So I say to myself, am I that same person? And then I realized that no matter how much I talk about taboo, today the taboo is also working inside me. And it's, the way it's easy to say that break the taboo, it's not so easy. Even for me, like a girl who always writes about these things, who always believes this in her heart, even she, for a moment, she said that to herself, and she felt that constant fear of being embarrassed, right? And the embarrassment dominated over irritation, whereas irritation should have dominated, because it's an irritating situation, right? So I don't want to suggest anything to the audience. I don't want to advise. I don't like to advise. I don't want to say, anything. It's just through this video, whoever my female audiences are, it's just my request, and it's just, sometimes we say like a New Year resolution, like that's sort of a resolution we say to ourselves, okay, we will try to do it. It's kind of like that. Not just you guys, along with you, also me. Let's together, let's make this resolution that the next time anything like that happens with us, if it happens in future, ever with us, let's be irritated, because it's normal, but not embarrassed. Let's not allow this taboo in our society to bully us, our mind, and our body. So next time, let's get irritated, but not embarrassed. Thank you so much.